United National Anti-War Coalition. We're a coalition in the United States of many local, regional, and national anti-war groups. And on behalf of UNAC and on behalf of the anti-war movement in the United States, I want to apologize for this base that's next door to you here, and for all these bases that we're putting in these countries that one after another from other countries have stood up and are fighting against. They make you all a target, and you shouldn't be that target. It is the United States which is the main cause of war, at least since the end of World War II, when the US proclaimed that it was the American century. NATO and its European allies have happily gone along with the United States in all of these wars. But the US since World War II has invaded around 50 countries. So when they talk to you about and vilify, every time they go against a country, they vilify the leader. Don't listen to it. It's 90% propaganda. And even if it's not, when these Western imperialist countries attack another country, it only aids that attack when you join in on that vilification. It is not the right thing to do. The US has about 20 times the number of foreign military bases as all other countries in the world combined. It is the main cause of war. The second country with the most foreign military base is the UK. The third is France. These are left over from the heights of their imperialist project. They now all support the US imperialist project, which is the cause of war. Some people think Trump is moving in a direction that perhaps is for peace. He's not. He's proposing a 20% increase in the US military budget. The US military budget was something around 43% of the military budgets of all countries in the world combined. With a 20% rise, which will bring it to $1 trillion in 1 year, what does that bring it to in terms of comparing to other military budgets? The other thing that, the other thing, of course, with the United States is nukes. We're the only country in the world that has ever sent nukes down over the heads of people, and in a flash killed hundreds of thousands. The US says it was to end World War II. We know that's not true. World War II ended in Europe already. It was still going on in Japan, but the Soviet Union moved its troops over and entered Manchuria. The Japanese military was falling apart. Most historians believe they were already suing for peace at the time they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. Many people think it wasn't to end World War II, but it was to start the Cold War. And the US can show what it could do to anybody that tried to stand in its way, and has been doing it ever since. But the thing I don't understand is, why did they drop the bomb on Nagasaki? The first bomb demonstrated the power, what it could do. If it was made to make Japan surrender, then it saw what would happen. If it was meant to start the Cold War, then the people of the world saw what could happen. Why did they drop it on Nagasaki? Because they are very bad people. They are people that don't care about human life. This is what Western imperialism is. This is what the United States is. This is what your countries, those others from Europe, and what you have done. What Belgium did in Africa. People that resisted them, they put them out there and they cut off both of their hands, or destroyed villages just because they could. And France, we heard the story of France. But the other side of that story, which is great, is there are French colonies that recently have kicked France out and got rid of their bases. And that's what has to happen all throughout the world. One other kind of war that the US has invented is called sanctions. The United States has sanctioned 42 countries that wouldn't go along with its demands and its bullying and its policies. This is before Trump's tariffs. It's not just Trump, it was the Democrats and Republicans. We have two pro-war parties in the United States. But there's some hope in this, because what did sanctions do? They pushed sanctions. They took people out of the SWIFT banking system, which stopped them from trading with other countries. So they said, we have to make our own trading alliances. We have to make our own kind of SWIFT. And that's what they're doing. They formed something called BRICS. We haven't heard that name yet in this conference, but it should be told in every anti-war conference. Who are the BRICS and who are the G7 countries? The G7 countries are the imperialist countries. The countries who became rich off of the rape of the land, the stealing of the wealth of other countries, and the stealing of their people for slaves and cheap labor and other things. That's why Europe and the United States are wealthy. That's who the G7 nations are. The BRICS are their victims. The BRICS are the colonial powers. And do you know that BRICS nations today are wealthier than the G7 nations? That whole paradigm has been turned on its head. This is the hope for the world. It's also why Trump is doing what he's doing with the tariffs, where we had a war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine, the narrative you got was incorrect. It was wrong. It was a proxy war by the US and NATO to try to overthrow Russia. There's lots of papers in these think tanks in the United States, like the RAND Institute, that goes over this, how to stretch Russia, how to divide it into 5 separate countries like they did with Yugoslavia and other places around the world. How they divided up other countries to make them so they could be controlled better. The thing about Ukraine is they lost. It is lost. That's why Trump's doing what he's doing. It's not because he's for peace. It's not because he's a good guy. It's because he's lost, and he wants to go on to the next most important thing, which is the most important thing for the rulers in the United States, both Democrats and Republicans. Some thought they could get Russia and then further surround China, but China is their goal, because China is surpassing the United States economically now. And what Trump did with the tariffs has really shown that in some way. Now, I think that's all very important for the anti-war movement. And one other thing which is very important, we see the terrible genocide and destruction that's going on in Palestine. But what that has done to people is it has raised their consciousness. The thing that the United States and these European countries have always been able to say, that we are the democracies, we are the bright lights. Those darker people don't understand life and freedom like we do. That turned reality on its head. That's not true. And people are waking up to it. They're seeing the children that are dying in Palestine. And they're seeing who supports it. You're seeing those bombs that are being dropped from those planes. It's U.S. planes, U.S. bombs, U.S. bullets, U.S. tanks, U.S. money, U.S. political support. And that of Europe also. In this country, they just decided to cut welfare. That is the program that helps the most needy in this society. They cut it by almost the exact amount that they give to Israel. They're cutting back in all social programs, but they give money to Ukraine. They want to start war, more war in Ukraine, maybe the Third World War, and so forth. Now, I think because of these things, the anti-war movement is in a good position, and we are seeing young people come out. I'm seeing it. You saw the campuses that were taken over, and despite the harsh repression that's taking place by places like Columbia, you know what they did to some of the kids that graduated last year? They got their scholarships after paying high fees for Columbia University. They took those away from them. They took, if they were protesting, they took their diplomas away from them after graduating. They expelled people. People have been arrested and disappeared. People are disappearing in the United States. I talked yesterday, or a couple of days ago, to someone from Minneapolis who said, we don't know what's happened because 5 people, foreign students from our Palestine support group, are gone. We don't know where they are. The police say they don't know where they are. Their roommates say they don't know where they are. People are disappearing in the streets. People come up to them and put them in handcuffs. These people have masks. They don't identify themselves. And people are being deported to these prisons. No. This session is really on strategy and action. I think I said why I believe that we're in a good place at this particular point, and we see youth. You know, I'm going to be at the NATO protest in The Hague. A lot of other people are. There's a lot of these students, young people, that came to the protest against NATO in Washington, D.C. last July, or was it June? I forget. But they are people that came out of the Palestine movement. That's where they came. I work with them. I know them. There's a lot of beginning of understanding among those people, not just on Palestine, but on other issues. This is the future for our movement. This is the future for peace. I was going to talk more about strategy, because in the United States, it's very clear there's no strategy through the electoral process. There's just 2 pro-war policies. The only strategy we can have is to be out on the street and build a movement. And I was going to talk more, and maybe I will. I have 1 minute. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience when I was young, a long time ago. It was during the Vietnam War. I helped organize against the Vietnam War and the Student Mobilization Committee to end the war against Vietnam. And I was a staff person for the National Peace Action Coalition that organized some of the massive demonstrations over and over again that took place against that war. But the depth of that movement, it reached down. It became a youth movement. Don't trust anybody over 30. I stopped saying that when I was 30. But it was a youth movement. It was in the culture. It was in their music. It was in the clothes they wore. It was in the art. And you know who else are young people? The soldiers. It was among the soldiers. In Vietnam, they started putting peace signs, the peace symbol that was made by CND and given to the whole world. What a great thing. Black soldiers would put the black fist on their helmet. No Vietnamese ever called me the N-word, they would say. They would disobey orders. They would do some things which are much worse. I'm not going to say what they are. Some of you know. They would disobey orders, refuse to go. The U.S. military in Vietnam ceased to be a fighting force, and they had to leave. 4 million Vietnamese were killed. But that's what a movement can do. It could reach that kind of depth that we can resist war and we can end war. And perhaps we can bring about a new society which will bring a world of peace and prosperity. And that's my hope.